Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle. You know, in my personal opinion, it is the singular disgrace of living in Obama's America that it is an age of seeing actual political prisoners who are singled out simply because of their ideologies and put in jail for embarrassing our progressive overlords. We're about to talk to one of those patriots right now because this is part one of our three-part in-depth interview with Dinesh D'Souza. He's a best-selling author, acclaimed academic, and creator of the second most popular political documentary of all time, which of course was 2016, Obama's America. His latest book is titled Stealing America: What My Experience with Criminal Gangs Taught Me About Obama, Hillary, and the Democratic Party. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So Dinesh, thanks for joining me. I got your book. I read it in one sitting in the airport on a flight. I couldn't put it down. It's spectacular, and we're going to break it up into three parts today. So the first part I would like to talk about is the actual trial. Your book reads like a really excellent legal thriller. I mean, you're on the edge of your seat here, like, what's going to happen to this guy? So let me start with this. Your attorney, Ben Brafman, said, I'm quoting from your book, apparently he told you, what you did is illegal. That's unfortunate. What's more unfortunate is that you're a smart fellow and you have committed one of the stupidest crimes in the history of American jurisprudence. So could we begin, if you would tell us just tell us what is the stupidest crime in the history of American jurisprudence, and what did you actually do?
So a college friend of mine named Wendy Long was running for the U.S. Senate in New York. And I had given her a check for $10,000, which is the maximum allowable campaign finance limit. As the campaign progressed, her campaign was in terrible trouble. She was way behind in the polls. She was imploring me to help her in other ways, serve on a fundraising committee, speak here, do this, do that. So I got a cockamamie idea in my head. I said, she needs a little more money. I asked two of my friends to write her a check for $10,000, and I said I would reimburse them. That was my crime. I exceeded the campaign finance limits, and as a result, I was prosecuted to the hilt for it.
And when the FBI showed up at your door, you weren't even sure what it was about, right?
I was completely baffled. I forgot all about it. I had no idea that I was going to be pursued as a felon. I had no idea I was facing the potential of criminal time. I'm not insane. I would never have done this had I thought that.
You weren't aware that you'd committed a crime at all, in other words?
I was not aware at the time. Absolutely
okay.
not.
So basically, before we get into the details of how the trial went, it was for campaign contribution irregularities. And in the book, you talk about what some other people had done who had received enormous personal gain. Can you give us one or two examples of what kind of behavior this law had failed to prosecute in the past?
So, for example, right about the same time as my case was making its way through the courts, another guy, now this, oddly enough, an Asian Indian guy named Chatwal, this fellow gave over $180,000 in straw donations to a whole bunch of Democratic candidates, including Hillary. Now, he was not only guilty of exceeding the campaign finance limits by 9 times what I did, but he also had witness tampering. The FBI recorded him trying to persuade a witness to lie under oath, and he was openly corrupt. He said, we have to buy these politicians, no other way to get them to do what we want. So this is why the campaign finance laws were justified, to break up this sort of attempts to buy influence. Now, I wasn't trying to buy influence. I didn't even tell Wendy Long I was doing this, so she had no knowledge that I had made this contribution. So here's a guy, much more egregious offense. He gets no prison, no confinement. He gets a fine, and he gets some community service, but less than me. And he gets some probation, but less than me. So this is my point. You know, the progressives always emphasize justice. That's their core value. But justice isn't just a matter of did you do it, but proportioning the penalty to the offense, making sure the other guys who did the same thing get a similar or comparable penalty.
So as we find out in the first chapter of this book, discussing the history of not just the history of the trial, but the history of the events leading up to the fact that you began to realize that you were in a lot bigger trouble than you deserved to be in, and that something else is going on here. Now, when you requested from the FBI why you were singled out, they apparently replied to you that it was a result of just a routine investigation into campaign finance irregularities. Can you tell me how many other people this routine investigation into irregularities produced in this giant dragnet that we undertake all the time?
Well, actually, none, or I should say one, just me.
Imagine my surprise.
This was the FBI director had said this was a routine review, his phrase, but the routine review apparently yielded a single offender. And moreover, when I spoke to legal authorities, including Alan Dershowitz, Alan, who's a liberal, said to me, he goes, Dinesh, look, I'm very familiar with this territory. He goes, what you did is quite common. as a quite common election violation. It happens in law firms, people do it all the time. And he goes, and so in general, there's a procedure for dealing with it as a civil matter, not a criminal matter. So he goes, I'm very sorry to say that you are being targeted by a very ruthless prosecution machine, which includes this Indian fellow, Preet Bharara, from the Southern District of New York, and then Eric Holder at the Justice Department, and Obama himself.
Well, just to stay on Dershowitz for a minute, because of one of the things that fascinates me a little bit outside of the scope of the book. He as you said, he said, we've seen this all the time, and he said, have no doubt, I'm quoting from your book, they're targeting for your views. And he went on to tell you apparently that he liked Obama and thought Obama was a good president, but the words he used, he said he found that your case was troubling and detestable. What they were doing to you, the specific selective prosecution of you, Alan Dershowitz found troubling and detestable. Did he ever explain to you how he could like a president whose behavior is troubling and detestable? That's kind of cognitive dissonance I have a hard time understanding.
Well, I think with Dershowitz, interesting history with Dershowitz. When I was at a rebel at Dartmouth, the Dartmouth Review, we would take on the college administration. The college president at the time, a fellow named Friedman, was a friend of Dershowitz. But yet Dershowitz blasted this guy and said he was trespassing on free speech. So even though it was a friend of his, Dershowitz was willing to go on the record saying what you're doing is wrong, that just because you don't like these guys' conservative views, you don't have a right to censor them. So to me, this was replaying that on a much bigger scale. Politically, he's on the left. He's on the side of Obama. He even likes this Bharara fellow. I don't. I mean, to me, Bharara is reminiscent of a kind of Indian gang leader type. But nevertheless, Dershowitz saying, I like these guys, but in this case, I know what they're doing. I know and they know that you made a movie very critical of Obama. I know and they know that he's a thin-skinned narcissist, and he's going after you because he doesn't like what you did to him. If
it were me, I'd pick different friends. The main thing I think that's so interesting about this first episode in your book about the trial is how long it took your attorney to come to realize that what apparently was clear to you much sooner than it was to him, that you were being selectively prosecuted for making a political statement that the president found embarrassing. Let's not forget, 2016, Obama's America did enormous business seen by a lot of people, and as you said, narcissist in chief, they can be argued with and they don't like it, but when they're mocked and when they're called out, they kind of lose their mind. So
you know, people would say to me, how do you know the President of the United States even cares about this? Well, I know because the film and I were vituperatively attacked on the website of onebarackobama.com. Now, I'm not saying Obama wrote it himself, but I'm saying he did approve it. This was the teeth of the campaign. This is his own personal website. And this was a typical screed which had the usual kind of bellicose pomposity and arrogance that we've come to see as the signature rhetoric of the president himself. So I recognized Obama's voice in it, but even if I'm wrong, it's something that did appear under his name.
Right, and you not only called, in that movie, you not only called out his politics, you pointed out simple facts like you got to be better friends with his half-brother than he was, and his half-brother would call you asking for assistance. This paints a pretty dark picture of just how narcissistic and self-centered this individual that's currently the president of the United States really is, and how vindictive he can be.
It exposed his hypocrisy. Remember, he had been going around, we are brother's keeper. This was sort of his mantra to defend progressive redistribution, but here was his actual brother living in the Haruma slum of Nairobi, walking through muck to get to our interview, and relying more on me than Obama to help him out when he had a kid who needed medical attention. So all of this put Obama, I think, in a justifiably bad light. And so look, the empire strikes back. That's what makes me dumb. I should have known there's a big target on my back, and for me to do the slightest infraction was going to bring down the weight of the authority of the U.S. government against me.
Yeah, you were operating under that quaint delusion that so many of us operate under, namely you dread First Amendment protection for free speech, and that as long as you were telling the truth, what could they possibly do to you? Let's go back to the story with your attorney, because I think in the first segment of this book, that was the part of the story that I found most hopeful, actually. You hired the best person you can, an attorney named Ben Brafman, and he was a liberal, like most liberals, especially in big cities, most attorneys, rather, in big cities are. And when the details began to emerge, not only of what you had done, but the charges that they were seeking and the means that they'd gone to, it began to dawn on him that what you had claimed very early on was that you were in fact being prosecuted by the President of the United States for your political views. Over time, this did begin to dawn on him, didn't it? Can you tell me a little bit about what his reaction to that was?
It happened in stages. Initially, he thought that this is a big misunderstanding. He would go march himself down there and straighten the whole matter out. Then he came back. He was super puzzled. He goes, no, I don't get it. He goes, these guys, they really want to lock you up, and they want to lock you up for a long period of time, and they want to basically put you out of business. And he was trying to digest that. So initially, he thought it's because I'm, quote, a high-profile individual. And that's the sole reason that they were going after me. But I think as the case proceeded, little incident after incident, it became very clear to him that there was something bigger afoot here. One clue for him was when he discovered that the government was trying to persuade the FBI. And the FBI had gone to my assistant, a 20-year-old at the King's College in New York, and tried to convince him to wear a hidden wire and do secret recordings of me. Now think about this. I had already admitted making these straw donations. So, but they were treating this like I was, you know, Al Capone.
That's right.
And so Braffman was just genuinely baffled. His bafflement increased, I think, by the end of it, when he saw the kind of sleazy tactics that the government was perpetrating. He saw that this clearly was, in fact, as I had suggested, a case of selective prosecution.
And not just in your case. You know, you made a movie that offended the President of the United States that landed you in a detention center. Hillary Clinton made a complete mess of the Benghazi situation, and she needed a scapegoat too. And so she said that the reason that the attack on Benghazi happened was because a filmmaker, Basli Nabula, had made a film 6 months ago on YouTube about the life of Muhammad, and this was just a spontaneous demonstration, and the Muslims were provoked and so on. He went to jail for a year over a very trivial, I think it was a parole violation in his case. 21 state troopers in the middle of the night. We always do that whenever anybody violates their parole. The first thing we do is get 21 state troopers out there at, at 1 o'clock in the morning and have him so traumatized he has to wrap his head in a towel to get in the car. So this is, I think, what I'd like to close this segment on with. You're a filmmaker. Nabula is an extremely minor filmmaker. Let's take Steven Spielberg as an example of a person who's genuinely recognized as a person of goodwill, and he's a filmmaker too. What would you say to Steven Spielberg and the rest of the Hollywood establishment when your case clearly, Nabula's case clearly, is the result of American citizens speaking their minds and being sent to jail because it was politically convenient for the current leadership to do that? What would you say to Steven Spielberg for not standing up in your defense?
You know, I think that this game can be played both ways. And it is true that when the government puts you into its sights, and this could be a Republican government or a Democratic government, they can unleash a merciless fury against you. Squadrons of FBI agents looking through your bank records, looking through your tax returns, reading all your books. And so the vulnerability of that is terrifying. I remember stepping in a courtroom, the United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza, and I really felt the weight of that the United States itself was putting its hand on my head and pressing me down. It's a challenge to your patriotism in a sense. But yes, I would say to these guys, look, be a little bit careful, because if you think that this is okay because it's happening on the other side of the aisle, your turn could very well be next.
That's pretty much it, right? They came after me, and then there was no one left to come after. That's exactly right. That's why it concerns me so much too, and why I find it so hypocritical of the left, who for the last 30, 40 years have been using this McCarthyism, this repression that happened in the 1950s, been using it just to flog conservatives forever. When in point of fact, the government didn't actually censor or put anybody in jail during the McCarthy era. They simply, the studios basically enforced that. You would think that a culture that has been that sensitized to censorship would have had a little more of a brave response to the cases of you and Mr. Nabula.
No, the left was present at my sentencing. There were guys from the Daily News, there were guys from the different left-wing websites and so on, and they were super excited about the idea of me going to prison. When a Clinton appointee judge said, I'm not sending him to federal prison, he's going to get confinement, you could see the dismay and disappointment on their faces. To them, I'm a race traitor. I'm a non-white guy who's not playing by the rules. I'm an embarrassment to their progressive mantras, and so they would rather lock me up, if not for what I did, than for who I am.
It's because they're hypocritical fascists who want unearned moral superiority, and they don't care what they have to do it. That's going to do it for this opening segment, but please stay tuned for 2 more segments with this brilliant and patriotic man, Dinesh D'Souza. And for goodness sakes, don't forget to buy his book, Stealing America. It's anywhere books are sold. It is taut reading and depressing and encouraging at the same time. For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for watching.